What is going on, guys? Brad Messersmith here from the Fantasy Golf Degenerates, bringing you another expert model breakdown on the fantasyfanatics.com. I believe that we will win. I chose that song because if you don't believe that you're going to win when you register, then don't register at all. Stay home. Set your money on fire instead. So, this week we have the Valero Texas Open. We are going to get straight into it. TPC San Antonio, par 72, yardage 7,435. Quick note, make sure you're paying attention to these things. Kevin Na has withdrawn. If there are any updates as the week goes on, you will find them in the notes section. So make sure to keep a close eye there. Make sure you're not putting Kevin Na into your lineups. That being said, we've got a kind of interesting dynamic here at the Valero Texas Open. We typically see guys perform well here who have performed well here in the past. We see a lot of guys with really good course history at the Valero Texas Open show up in a big way almost every year pretty consistently. So we'll talk about some of those guys. A few of them I'm going to leave off. The Charlie Hoffmans of the world, I think you guys probably will have already known about at this point. Going to mention some of the guys I like the most and talk a little bit about my expert model. As always, if you want to get my expert model, you can download it yourself on the fantasyfanatics.com. You can get a link to that in the description. Become a premium member. You get all the access to all of the tools, including my GPP model, the one I use to build my lineups every single week using the lineup generator. So really cool stuff. Make sure you get over there and check out all of the tools if you haven't already. If you like these videos, take a second to leave a comment. Take a second to make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can get every single one of them. Kenny does a really awesome cash game video. If you are into the Euro Tour, we have a Euro Tour expert, iPod Todd, who is doing expert models and videos every single week for the Euro Tour. So really good action there. Make sure to get over there and take advantage of all of the awesome stuff and subscribe to the channel to get all of the expert model breakdowns. Let's go ahead and get into it. So the key stats this week, as always, this should come as no surprise. Birdie or better percentage is a 5 weighting. Really shows up pretty heavily in the trends tool. Obviously, we know at this point that Draftkings scoring or fantasy golf scoring is going to trend pretty heavily with birdie or better percentage. It's just the nature of the beast. So birdie or better percentage gets a 5 weighting, which is a little bit higher than it typically does. Draftkings points gained par 72 events. This is obviously a par 72 event. It correlates really heavily in the trends tool as it typically does. Strokes gained tee to green gets a 3 weighting. This one also should come as no surprise. This is a stat. This and birdie or better percentage you can almost expect to be in every single model. Not every one of them, but a big chunk of them. All-around ranking is one that shows up that is not as common. It does show up in the trends tool this week. Kind of correlates well with some of the offline statistical analysis I do each week. So all-around ranking is going to make its way in there this week. Strokes gained approach is also significant in the model this week. It gets a 2 weighting. And last but not least, strokes differential field average, which is kind of an all-around skill setting. So my recommendation to you if you're building your own models, especially for GPPs like I have here, do not weight things like stroke differential field average or strokes gained total, any of those types of stats. You don't want to weight too heavily because you're not necessarily looking for the best golfers in your lineups. You are looking for golfers who are going to have the ability to play well for 4 straight rounds. And that does not always mean that the best golfers are going to perform for 4 straight rounds. So definitely something you need to be thinking about if you're building models. You want to be thinking about what types of tournaments, what types of fantasy tournaments you're going to be playing in, and use your model building tools accordingly. So all of that being said, I did a little bit of I kind of zigged a little bit this week because the weights are going to be a little bit different than you're used to seeing. So the stats weight is actually down to 55%. Ordinarily, I really like to weigh the stats heavily. It's one of the things that I think as a sharp DFS player is in your advantage, to really take into account the stats heavily. However, like I said in the top of the video, course history is a little bit more significant here than we see at other tracks. We see guys like Charlie Hoffman, like Daniel Summerhays, even some kind of strange names we'll get into a little bit later, tend to perform very, very well and consistently perform well. So weighting course history a bit higher than I normally do. Recent form gets a 20%, which is right in the range that you're used to seeing. and then stats gets bumped down a little bit. So definitely something to take note of. It's an adjustment I'm making. Like I said, you can download my model, you can create your own model, you can make adjustments to those numbers however you see fit. So I want to start with Brooks Koepka, who is going to be probably kind of a hot topic this week. Obviously, his price at $10,900 is not anything to write home about, especially given the fact that he has been playing awful. He's been playing absolutely terrible. He is a guy that I'm going to be completely fading. That being said, his ownership projection right now is 6.22%. I expect the fact that this is a bomber's course to have at least some people kind of pique their interest. However, Brooks Koepka is not somebody I'm interested in. I think that at this point we can kind of admit to ourselves that he is not the golfer he has been in past years. I don't know what's behind that. There's maybe some narrative that exists, but I don't know what it is. So I'm going to take a wait-and-see approach on Brooks Koepka. That being said, I think some people are going to roster him, and with the low ownership percentage, if he does find a way to turn a corner this week and perform well in a weaker field, it's certainly going to look good in your lineups if you have something like 15-20% of him and he finds his way into the top 10 or the top 5. That's going to be something that you're really going to benefit from. Personally, I'm going to take the loss if that happens, because I think it's more likely that he does not finish in the top 10. I think it's very possible he misses the cut, but I also think that it's more likely that he makes the cut and just doesn't finish very, very highly, which is not something I want from Brooks Koepka at $10,900. So I want to point out an interesting tool here, which is part of why I want to fade Brooks Koepka. If you go to this drop down, there's a key stats breakdown, and if you're not using any of these drop downs from week to week, you should be. There are some really interesting tools here. There's some really very interesting takeaways that you can get from these tools. If you pull up this key stats breakdown and look at Brooks Koepka, you will see outside of birdie or better percentage, which is he's 15th ranked this year, you will see that his stats in almost every other category are a fraction of what they were in years past. His all-around ranking is down almost 70 spots. His strokes gained approach the green is 195th ranked, which is about as bad as I think it's ever been. So, like I said, I mean, we kind of know at this point that Brooks Koepka is probably not the golfer, at least this season, that he has been in the past. This is a great way of validating that. If you have that hunch about guys, come into the key stats breakdown and take a look. What kind of stats metrics did they have in years past, and where did they land in the results? So I'm going to go back to the regular cheat sheet. Next guy I want to talk about is Ryan Moore, who I'm not really sure about in terms of ownership. Look out for my ownership projections being adjusted throughout the week. For those of you who don't know, I am actually the one who uploads these ownership projections in the weekly cheat sheet. I do some more of my statistical analysis, and I do adjust them throughout the week. So they will change as we get closer to lineup lock. Ryan Moore may be a guy who changes. Right now, I don't have a great feel for how popular he's going to be. But all of that being said, I don't care. I really like Ryan Moore. Overall, he is second ranked in my model. If you look, his recent form is trending upward. He had a 9th place finish. That was actually at the Masters. So definitely really like to see that kind of performance on a big stage. And he is a guy who does have a top 10 finish. His course history is going to be a little bit inflated just because there's one data point here. So keep that in mind. But Ryan Moore is a guy I really, really like. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's a Texas guy too, which definitely piques my interest, to say the least. So don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure Ryan Moore is, if he's not a Texas guy, he has performed well in the Texas swing in the past. So Brendan Steele is a guy that I think just about everybody likes at 9,900 with the good course history, good recent form, fantastic stats for the event. Brendan Steele is going to make my cash lineup. He's going to make a huge percentage of my GPP lineups. I expect that 21% ownership to change in a very significant way. He could be the highest owned golfer on the slate. The only thing that I think could take away from his ownership is this next guy, Adam Hadwin is absolutely on fire. He is playing far and away the best golf he's played in his career. I don't expect that to change here. I think statistically, he makes a lot of sense. He's coming in with great form. Course history is nothing to write home about, but he has not had a whole lot of finishes here. So I really like Adam Hadwin. He's a guy I'm going to continue to jump on. I think he's probably at least a consideration in cash. There's not a whole lot that's pointing me away from Adam Hadwin at this point. Tony Finau is not going to come as any surprise. Obviously, you guys have heard me talk about him a lot, especially on a track like this, which is kind of well known as a bomber's track. Certainly, distance off the tee is going to help. It's not something that I'm really weighing in my stats model because the trends tool does not paint a perfect picture when it comes to driving distance, but it certainly is not going to hurt. And Tony Finau is a guy who has performed well on courses that don't necessarily fit the Tony Finau mold in terms of his stats. At this point, Tony Finau is pretty well known as a guy who's long off the tee, but this year he has actually been very good in several other stats categories, has played well on greens that don't really fit the mold for Tony Finau. He's been kind of known as a Bermuda-only type putter. Doesn't seem to be the case this year. Tony Finau has been very diverse and has played well on courses that don't really necessarily make sense for Tony Finau. Here we are back on a course that I think makes perfect sense for Tony Finau, and he's 8,400 in a weak field. Sign me up. Tony Finau won last year in a weak field. I think that he's going to win again this year. I think he's a guy who is trending upward in a major way. I expect in the next few years you'll see him in the 10K and up range very, very consistently in salary. Tony Finau, sign me up. I can't say enough about Tony Finau. I will definitely be overweight on the field than him. With him in GBPs, he might make my cash lineup. Keegan Bradley gets a red dot because Keegan Bradley gets a red dot for me almost every single week. There are very, very few weeks that I play Keegan Bradley. I know people are talking about Keegan Bradley. It's not worth it. Don't put him in your cash lineup. Please don't put him in your cash lineup. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. It's not worth the headache that you're going to feel when he finds a way to shoot a 75 on a Saturday and miss the cut. Don't do Keegan Bradley. Luke List is a guy that I really like. Again, I'm not really sure about his popularity. I think the miscut last week is going to keep people off of him a little bit, but he is a guy that, again, I think is playing a very, very strong season. Statistically makes a lot of sense. Pretty long off the tee, good recent form, good course history, although I want to take a look at that because I don't recall. He may only have one or two. So he's got 2 results here, 2 made cuts, nothing really to write home about in terms of high finishes. So, I don't know how much to read into that, but it's certainly not going to keep me off of him. Like I said, the recent form is obviously very good. You can see the miscut last week at the Heritage. So, I'm hoping that this miscut kind of keeps people off of him, but again, I'm not really sure. I'm not sold on his popularity yet. I think he actually may be a little bit more popular than people think, just because I'm hearing him talked up quite a bit. Sung Kang is a golfer who is a little bit surprising to me to see how well he correlates stats-wise on this course. He's really been trending upward. He's a guy that certainly has some upside in GPPs, definitely the type of golfer who can come off of 3 or 4 straight missed cuts or some bad performances and find his way in the top 5. He even won under similar circumstances, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely a golfer who makes sense in GPPs. At this point, I think he's probably a guy, given the fact that he's trending upward, that we want to jump on now before it's too late. Tom Hoge at 6,500 is probably one of the most interesting plays I have on the cheat sheet this week. His ownership projection is only 0.33%. I don't expect it to go much higher than that. However, he is 7th ranked overall when it comes to my model. You have to kind of throw the stats out of the window because he does not have a lot of stats this year, has not been playing a whole lot. But his recent form is actually not terrible. Does have a top 10 at the Puerto Rico Open. Again, a weak field there, but certainly something to take into account. 4 of 4 made cuts over the last 3 months and does have a top 10 at this course. So I won't be going overboard with Tom Hoge, but I will be definitely playing a little bit of him, something like 6 to maybe 10%, depending on what I think his ownership is going to be, is probably enough for a guy like Tom Hoge. But most of the time he's going to miss the cut. If for some reason he finds a way to make a top 10, he is going to put your lineup, a couple of your lineups in a really good spot to win a GPP. So that is going to do it for us this week. If you guys have any other questions or concerns, want to know more, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at BMSDFS. Like I said, if you like the video, do not forget to click the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment, and let me know what your favorite golfers are, and we will make some adjustments to the ownership percentages based on what you guys have to say, and we will catch you guys next time.